All right, folks, welcome back to Mike and Maurice's Mind Escape. We have episode number 50 today, DMT and Jaguars. You can check us out at Mike and Maurice mindescape.com and patreon.com/Mike and Maurice. Also, you can check out our guest Paul and Justin's page, Dreaming Jaguars, on YouTube. What's going on, Paul? What's going on, Justin?
Good, mate. Yeah, very good. Thank you.
We're all good, buddy. We're all good.
So I actually, the first time I saw your clip, your first episode, Dick Kahn had posted it on his Instagram page. I'm like, what is this? It was kind of interesting. It was almost like had a real documentary or film kind of a approach to it. What was your inspiration when starting that?
Okay, so I'm the filmmaker. I'm a photographer, landscape photographer by trade. So I got into filmmaking a couple of years ago, I suppose. A friend and I set a company up, taking people out to Iceland on photography workshops. And we bought a drone, and then we got picked up by a guy on LinkedIn. We did some work for BBC Earth. We travelled, quite extensively doing the work we do. But obviously, Justin and I go back, for 20 odd years, and this the psychedelics is what we've been into from a personal growth perspective. And the filmmaking stuff that I do for clients, etc., is great. But I wanted to do something that we could do that would sort of tell the story of what we're trying to do and get our feelings across about what we do and sort of almost try and to take away the demonizing of this topic. And it seems to be pushing more and more into the mainstream, and good things are coming out of the research that's being done with these substances for treating mental health and PTSD, and obviously the personal growth side of it, and just the outright craziness of it all. We wanted to sort of say that, to get across that we're just normal guys. I mean, I've got a building company as well. Justin's in construction. We've got wives and kids. And we just wanted to get across that these things are good for the soul, aside from the potential going forward, for humanity as to possibly what we could be getting into. We wanted to do something that sort of, tells that story, really. That's why.
Also, the synchronicity of our lives right now. I mean, for me especially, I've just sold shares in a business, and to go forward with what Paul and I wanted to do would have probably had an effect on my business career. Now I'm not kind of in that situation anymore. It puts me in a place now where we can post this stuff, and should it come to light to people, who we know around, or if it comes to anyone who used to know within the business, doesn't matter anymore because I'm not in that business world. People can't judge me on it because there is a lot of judgment around this stuff, of misunderstanding.
Sure.
People generally aren't open to actually learning about it before they make a judgment on it. And I think from Paul and I's perspective, with his skills in the filmmaking and the stuff, the cinematography that we can do, or Paul can do around that, and I'm trying to learn that as we go, and with our slightly mad and wacky take on what we do and what we talk about, we thought it would bring it together, like Paul said, two normal guys, not using it recreationally, not using it constantly over the 15 years. It's not been a weekly or monthly thing that we've done. It's had times when there's been years without us using it. But still, the insight and stuff that we've got from it gives us this different perspective, which is what we essentially want to try and get across. That's right.
And also as well, when you want to try and do something and you want to make it successful, you've got to look for a new angle. And I watch extensively all of the top guys that talk about psychedelics on YouTube, and there aren't any UK lads with a sort of a bit more of a not down to earth, that's the wrong word. We're not academics, we're not scientists, we're not philosophy graduates. We're just two normal guys that have had extensive experience in this field, and we thought it would be cool to bring a normal guy aspect to it and try and make it a bit fun. And like I say, there's not really anything like this coming out of the UK with the sort of cinematography that we're trying to put to it, and it's pretty on the eye, it's entertaining, and at the same time we're trying to get that message across that these things are potentially good.
Yeah.
You guys bring up a good point, though, talking about how, you know, you had to sell shares of your business, or there's an aspect of this that's a cult or underground because it is such a taboo subject. I mean, for me, I've talked about my past. I mean, I don't really use stuff anymore. But when I, you know, was going through, I had bad OCD. I've used some visionary plant medicine to help, which I was familiar with. High school and college, we did a lot of stuff and experimented with a lot of stuff. And but it's even like talking about that, like something that dramatically helped improve my life. It's almost like I don't care, you know, I don't give a fuck, whatever I'm going to say, whatever I feel, you know, in terms of our podcast, and this is just truth, you know, there's no bullshit here. So I'm not afraid to talk about it, but when we were getting into this, that is something I thought about. I'm like, should I be saying this? But then I'm like, fuck it. It helped me. I'm a better person because of it. And it helped.
And the more people that come out, you know, I think the times are changing. Pot's becoming legal. Mushrooms are being studied to help with, you know, depression and stuff. So we'll see what happens in the next couple of years. But yeah, no, it takes people like us to, you know, say, like, I mean, I appreciate what you guys are doing. You know, a couple of guys, normal dudes, going out there, you know, just saying, hey, this isn't, you know, the worst stuff ever. Actually, it's quite the contrary. It is good for you, or it can help you if done in the correct, you know, settings or whatever.
Yeah, and the right people, you know, it's not for everybody. That's for sure. It's not for everybody. You know, there are people out there that these experiences could quite possibly damage them considerably. But at the same time, and even those people, I mean, taken in the right with the right guidance and the right run up to that experience, then maybe there isn't anybody that it couldn't help. But yeah, you wouldn't just go, there you go, mate, have a go on that, and you're going to be fine.
Well, Justin was saying about synchronicities. I think that plays a huge part of it too. There's like a mystical side of these things that most people we've interviewed now, I don't know how many, 10, 15 different people were talking about this kind of stuff on this podcast. And we know a lot of people in real life too. But the weird thing is everybody talks about either learning something, these entities that they see under DMT, ayahuasca, or just some sort of like breadcrumbs of knowledge, you know, like there's always a story involved with that. So it's never just recreational. I mean, I know people do use it recreationally, but it seems like even DMT, it's so powerful, so potent that it's not something to be fucked with. It's something that should be used, you know.
I'll definitely.
Like bring a respect to it, you know.
Definitely got to have the right intent when you're going in on it. And secondly, I mean, I've not watched a lot of these, and I'm assuming they're younger guys who do it as a recreational thing and then just want to talk about it. For Paul and I, it's never going to be a recreational thing. You can, from our personality, with the normal day-to-day life, we found that when there's been times when it's gone on a little bit too long, you know, it generally then peters away on its own because normal reality starts to become a bit jaded. It becomes a little bit lucid, if you like, and, you know, we'll discuss that. And for some reason, the times that we come to use it, we'll literally just sit there and talk about it rather than actually do it. And I suppose for us, there's always I want to say mature approach to how we're using this stuff. And generally, over the last 12, 15 years, I've found that the times that we have used it, and I think I've mentioned this before, there have been lessons or epiphanies that have come off the back end of using it about stuff that we may or may not been aware of what's going on in our life. And it gives a bit of understanding and comfort from that. So I don't know whether that's just a breakdown of the self and an ability then to understand and take a look at the bigger picture, or whether it's actually, you know, this stuff is relaying the information, because the information I find that went after a session isn't instant. It takes a week or two to analyse and think about what it was you were perceiving and what information was coming across. But getting back into the people thing, I've never been very vocal about what I've done. Obviously, the position I was in, it wasn't a good thing to go around talking about this, but Paul's always been quite open to it. And what's made me laugh is Paul's attitude towards it, and his general persona will bring people in, and people will then open up to him. So there's been a couple of people that you would have never imagined doing this, and I'm not going to mention any names, and I know Paul won't. But then he's come and told me about these guys, and I'm like, wow, you know, you wouldn't have expected that someone in that position would be that open with you, Paul, and tell you about it. And from the back end of that, we have discovered that there are like ayahuasca sessions that go on in this country.
Oh yeah.
Which is something that we've considered, but
well, I think also just going back to the, you know, the recreational side of it. I don't think that if someone has had a proper breakthrough dose of DMT, there's no way that they're going to go, wow, that was amazing, I want to do that again right now. You know, that's just not going to happen. So the recreational side of it, probably doing lighter doses, and yeah, you can do that recreationally, but that's not where the knowledge and the further flung reaches of this sort of topic are. That lies in the big doses or the larger doses. So yeah, I mean, like I say, I would put my mortgage on it that no one is going to go in for a second go after a breakthrough dose and go, I want to do that every week. It's just not going to happen, because you know, you're just going to scare the life out of you, to be fair. And if you're not used to it, you don't know what you're getting yourself into. It can change. It can change. It does change people's lives and belief systems. You know, after one breakthrough dose, it's like it's almost.
Well, it can be enough for some people.
Yeah, it's once is enough, and I've given it to people before who have wanted to do it and have done the research. I've made them do the research, but they've gone into it once and that's it. They're not doing it again, but they are sort of confident and, you know, aware that as far as they're concerned, there's more to this. There's infinitely more to this reality than there was before they had that experience. So yeah, it's not recreational, and I don't think, like I said, it definitely wouldn't be recreational. You know, going after a big dose, it's not going to be done.
So you brought up a point. You said there's people doing ayahuasca ceremonies there. We were talking about it. It seems like, and I don't know, maybe it's just the kind of group of people that I've been talking to and community online and stuff. But it seems like there's a lot of people from England and Britain and stuff that are doing this. Like, you know, we've interviewed Dick Kahn, DMT and My Call Mind, you know, R and Voot, Spirit Sky, Paul, our buddy Paul that was just on. It seems like it seems like there's something going on over the you know, by you guys
across the pond.
Yeah, across the pond. That
sorry, Mike. Sorry, carry on.
No, you're good. You're good. No, I was just saying, can you put your finger on something specifically, or is it just something that's happening there?
I think. I mean, you know, these sort of topics are now being published on the front page of high-profile magazines. They're talking about the research that's going on at Johns Hopkins, and can magic mushrooms cure PTSD and all this sort of stuff. It's coming to the forefront of mainstream media, even if it's a bit tentatively. But I think just in general, there seems to be like an underlying, you know what it's like with populations or populations as a whole. Something seems to gather momentum, and then people are just sort of drawn towards these things, maybe for the betterment of people's lives in an unknown way, like a collective consciousness. Something is happening that sort of moves people in a particular direction. This at the moment seems to be the buzzword, and it seems to be growing almost exponentially. And people that 5 or 10 years ago wouldn't have even walked in the circles with, you know, as other people that have had these experiences. The word is spreading, and people are curious. We're curious. Human beings are curious by nature. And yeah, it's definitely growing in popularity. And certainly, I mean, I've now bumped into people through my other business and I've one particular guy, one client of mine is a great lad. We've done a lot of work for him. I went to his house, I stood in his office, we were sorting out payment for the work that we'd done, and I noticed a book by Daniel Pinchbeck that was propping up his iMac. It was breaking open the head. When I looked at the other books that he was using to prop this iMac up, there was The Spirit Molecule, there was Terence McKenna's Invisible Landscapes, and I was like, so straight away, he and I would never have made that correlation a few years ago, and we just straight away, bang, and we were into the conversation, and he'd been to Peru, he'd done various different ceremonies in the UK, and he opened me up then to connected me to people that run ceremonies in the UK, and it's just like, yeah, it seems to be growing, very quickly. Dennis McKenna obviously talks a good point when he says that maybe the planet itself is reaching out to us to try and heal what the damage that we've done. It's almost like it was in the jungle for so long, and now it's moving out to the States and across Europe, and everybody's getting this information. Maybe it's the planet's attempt to help.
There's another key thing there, and I'm not aware or I wouldn't know about the other people you've spoken to, especially from England, but taking it away from the demonisation thing as well, it's not kind of like a street drug, so it's not something that I believe that you can go and buy from your local drug dealer. Right. They're generally more obsessed or dealing with the other kind of drugs, and this is something that is, if you want to do it, you have to explore it, and you have to find out your own means and methods and put a lot of work in to be able to. And maybe because that information is open now and available for people to expand their knowledge around that stuff in that way. Yeah, so if you took a businessman who wanted to expand or have a look at this stuff, he wouldn't have to actually go to a local drug dealer who he's probably not going to know or trust to go and find this stuff. It's done in a completely different way. So I think from that angle as well, it's kind of moving it away from that whole genre, the
dark side,
which is more open to other people getting involved in it.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that's too why I think pot's becoming legal too. In a huge part, you're taking that other element. I mean, a lot of weed dealers weren't violent in any way or dark in any way, but it just seems like now everybody has access to it. There is no real underbelly. But how did you guys come up with the name Dreaming Jaguars, and what kind of significance does that have?
Dreaming Jaguars. So so during our sessions, we would put not all the time, but sometimes we would put YouTube videos on. We would get sort of shamanic music and have that sort of vibe going on whilst the sessions were underway. And there was there's a shamanic YouTube channel or artist possibly, which is Jaguar Dreaming. And obviously we like the significance of the Jaguar. Yeah, the branding of it was quite cool. We thought, it's quite an attractive. It's a name that you don't sort of forget. So we just reversed it and Dreaming Jaguars.
Well, I think when we were talking about it, when we used to watch it, it had that kind of an attachment. And before we really thought about the YouTube stuff and the filming, we used to name our sessions. They had many names, didn't they? And the places that we created. So I've got a place in my garage that we created, like a room that we could sit in that was peaceful. And we used to come up with nicknames for these places. And I think somewhere along the line, the Jaguars Dreaming became into our vocabulary. So when we were looking at starting the YouTube channel, we were discussing the YouTube channel, and then the name kind of just fell into place. It wasn't even like a choice or a decision. It just seemed to fit for us.
As you sort of, I suppose, as you start to pick at the whys and what fors, and obviously we put the name down, and we're like, okay, that's cool. And then you start to think, well, actually, sort of the relevance of it. Justin always likens me when he comes out of a DMT session and sort of maybe looks across at me for a bit of grounding. He always says I've got like a cat mask on my face, and obviously the Jaguar has massive significance to the ayahuasca experience and to the natives indigenous folks of South America, the jaguar as a spirit animal, dreaming jaguars, and we're sort of dreaming about the future of this topic, and it all just fitted together quite nicely, really.
Have you seen the videos with the jaguars actually tripping? It seems like on DMT.
They're chewing the leaves, and
that's the first thing I thought when I saw your name of your channel. I'm like, these guys are fucking doing something with these jaguars. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I thought it was actually a great name for a channel, especially, I don't know, it just seemed to fit with your movies and the approach that you were taking. But yeah, I don't know, that is the first thing I thought, you know, the jaguar. And then it's like when jaguars eat that and they're all high on DMT, are they dreaming about human beings, you know? Because I've seen a couple trip reports where people talk about seeing jaguars within the DMT realm.
Yes, yeah, definitely, and especially I think the ayahuasca experience there's a lot of jaguar involvement, and it's meant to be a sort of symbol of strength and you know, power and sort of the ruler of the jungle type affair. So yeah, it was a cool name.
There's a lot of that symbolism in the Mayan and Inca stuff.
Yeah.
So
yes,
I think there's and I've got a big tattoo which relates to some Mayan stuff, and it kind of like that whole
just worked.
And actually, right at the start, when we first started using the compound, the actual South American Mayan Inca type visuals that we used to get were really, and I don't know if it was because of the material we were using back then.
I think it's just it's a difficult one, isn't it? With the experience changes over the more the more experiences you have, the experience to start with is not the experience that we have now, but it is obviously it's the same, but it's the introduction to the experience. So as the experience begins, the emphasis used to be very much on South American and Aztec, Mayan, Incan symbolism and hieroglyphs, and you know that sort of vibe to it.
Colors,
and the colors were very earthy and oranges and golds and reds. But as we've sort of progressed into it, I'm guessing whether or not, you know, changes have taken place in the brain, maybe, or however that works. I mean, I'm not a neuroscientist, but as you go into the experience, as we go into the experience now, we seem to just sort of fall straight past that initial, you know, the starting experience, and just go straight through into the DMT space, and voomp, you're there almost instantly, rather than pushing through these levels to get to that spot, if that makes sense.
So it sounds like you guys have a lot of similar experiences. Is there anything that's very different between the two when you guys?
I suppose I always think that if two people have exactly the same experience, then obviously this experience is notoriously hard to explain, to the point where words don't actually, there are no words to really, we do our best, and like McKenna says, it's a lie, I'm sure, as to what you're telling someone when you're telling them what is happening in that experience. But if two people from different walks of life had the same experience, almost the identical experience, they could tell two very different stories about it, but there would be similarities in the stories that sort of give you this general gist of what's gone on. Does that make sense? Or is that?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we've had very similar experiences and vastly different experiences, but the
stages are always the same.
The what's the word I'm looking for? The rhythm of the experience is the same. If that makes sense. So that you go in, you go through the initial
vibration,
the vibration, reality.
You're through.
Yeah, now that you say that, the vibration things, I've had like 4 different people that we've interviewed talk about the vibration or the humming that comes on right after you hit it. Now
shatters and vibrates into.
Do you guys think that it's like, you know, it's a proven thing that vibrations, you know, if you've seen these experiments with like sand on a board and they play music and it vibrates it and it goes into a pattern, or the snowflake, the Japanese scientists that use positive and happy music, and it created these beautiful geometric shapes, and then metal music, and it's these ugly disformed shapes. So do you think that there's something on a vibrational plane going on? Do you think that DMT is like a ticket to like a metaphysical realm, or what's your guys' theory on that?
For 100%, there's sometimes when I've done it and I've like played with what I've played with what I'm doing in there. So I'm kind of going in, and at that initial point, so just humming the vibration, the om vibration.
Yeah.
That, I mean, you can do it in a meditative state, but under the experience of the DMT, the feeling through the body and what it actually, so what you're saying, like the sound on the speaker, how it changes that, the geometrics that you see, what it actually does to your visual experience is like really intense. And sometimes it's so intense that you can't actually keep it up. You have to stop because you just...
And these are on lower doses.
Yeah, these are lower
obviously
doses.
On a high dose, you're gone. That's it. There's no
there's no vocal.
I'm going to have a go at making an om sound and see what happens, because that concept is just not even there. Your body's not even there. You are essentially not human anymore and part of this.
And the vibration, the thing of those high ones is literally you feel a vibration, you hear a noise, and then you're gone. There's a breakdown of the ego or whatever, and there's a fear that, hang on a minute, am I breathing? Have I died? And then there's an understanding, okay, if I'm dead, I'm dead, that's it. And then by that time, you're then lost to who you were back then. You're having this experience. And then by the time you come around and remember, oh yeah, I've done DMT, you're already on your way out, and you're like gutted that you haven't tried to remember exactly, because there was a long time where we were like, let's go in and try and keep this information.
Yeah. But in answer to your question, Mike, for me, yes, doing DMT, doing a high dose of DMT is, for me, in my experience, is maybe the brain chemistry is rewired or rearranged so that then the filter system of the brain that allows you to carry on functioning in this physical reality somehow gets wiped, lifted, and the perception and reality change dramatically, and maybe you're opening yourself up to infinitely higher levels of reality that we can't and wouldn't need to function in this physical reality, if that makes sense. So yes, for me it does. There is something else to it, definitely, 100%.
Yeah, I interviewed this guy Jack he has a channel called Trip Whip. It's pretty cool too on YouTube. It's an Australian guy. He's talking about his DMT experiences and what he thinks it means and stuff. But the thing he said too is, we talked about pareidolia a lot. And he said that when you're under there, it's almost like this veil's being lifted and you're seeing, if you Terrence McKenna's stoned ape theory about how he thought, obviously I think he rebuffed that later in his career, but talks about how he thinks that mushrooms had a huge part in changing or improving our visual acuity as we were evolving, rounding edges and different things like that. But we have this thing when we look at somebody's face, or we're looking at something in particular, we're just putting patterns together. And, in modern day, you look up at a cloud and you can see, a dog in the cloud. That's just pareidolia. There's no actual dog in the cloud, but it looks like that. So our conversation was predicated around maybe DMT lifts this mask of pareidolia, so we're not putting patterns together anymore. Just whatever is the actual space is what the space is, kind of,
Yeah. I mean, it's almost, I don't profess to know what's going on. There's no way that anybody can know what's going on when you have these experiences, but it definitely feels like the richness of the experience, the knowledge, the intent of the entities that you come into contact with, the whole thing feels magical to a certain extent, and way over and above anything that we are currently able to comprehend. So you sort of come back from the experience, and I read a great comment on the DMT and Spirit Molecule YouTube video. This guy had put this long, lengthy comment, and the crux of it was that this experience is not going to enlighten you. It gives you, you end up with more questions than answers. But what it will do, it will install in you a knowing that there is infinitely more that we don't understand as humans. We sort of have this arrogance that we're at the top of the food chain, you know, and what we know so far is what we know. And then obviously 10, 15, 20 years down the line, a scientific theory comes about that disproves something that was taken for granted at that time. So it almost sort of takes away that arrogance, and then you think, actually, yeah, we don't know jack shit is the reality of the situation. But what it is anybody's guess. You know, that's the thing.
Well, don't you think though, like what you were saying takes away your arrogance? There's a certain part of us that like clings on to what we think of who we are, you know? So anytime you're about to go into a psychedelic trip, it's like, what the fuck did I just do? I mean, DMT is a little different because you're blasting off instantly if it's not ayahuasca. But if you're doing mushrooms, you eat the mushrooms, it takes like 45 minutes to really kick in or so, you know, and while you're sitting there thinking like, what the fuck did I just do? And then by the time it kicks in, you're like, you know, it's fun, you have a good time. But there's a certain part of us that's always clinging on to this piece of us that we think is what normal is, or almost like a base camp of our consciousness. And once you start to go somewhere else from there, it starts to get real fucking hairy real quick, even to the point where recently I cut back on smoking and vaping, and I took a couple of vape hits the other night. I'm like, holy fuck, this is enough for me, you know, like that kind of a thing. It almost made me rethink weed for a minute. So, yeah, I think to your point, the whole ego thing is just, you know, it's ingrained into us. And whenever you can snap out of it for a second, it's a little scary.
But very beneficial.
Yeah. So do you guys, what's your plan with your channel? Are you gonna eventually make like a full documentary, or are you just gonna make a bunch of these episodes? Do you guys have?
I think the documentary would be.
That's always been a dream.
Yeah, it would be a dream to be able to do that. And actually, from the very start, once like when Dick Kahn came on straight away, and Andrew Gallimore,
So we've been speaking to a few guys. Dick Kahn obviously was the first contact that I made, and he obviously put me on to you guys. RN Voot as well, we've been speaking to him extensively over the last few days on Instagram, and he actually lives very close to us, believe it or not. Talking synchronicities.
Yeah,
nice.
That's awesome.
We're in the same town, which is like incredible, really. So, and he seems like a cool guy. So we're going to try and do something with him. Andrew Gallimore, are you familiar with Andrew Gallimore?
No, I'm not familiar with him.
You should definitely check him out. So his website is Building Alien Worlds. So he is, I don't want to do disjustice with getting it wrong, but he's a neuroscientist, neurobiologist, and he has worked recently with Rick Strassman to come up with a way of doing a prolonged DMT experience via intravenous, keeping you in the breakthrough.
Wow, yeah, because it's only like 15 minutes long.
Yeah, they're talking like hours on end.
So so Dr. Andrew Gallimore, Building Alien Worlds, he lives in Japan, but check his YouTube videos out, because he has actually come up with, you know, really credible scientific theories as to what may be happening when we go into these states. Right. And he is talking alternate realities and alternative dimensions, and these entities that exist in these spaces, as far as his theories are concerned, could be real, and he shows you how that would work. And he's an insanely clever guy. So we've been talking to him, whether or not we'll be able to get to do a video with him, because obviously he lives in Japan, but he's from the UK as well. So maybe one day.
Has he done it like before? Like, I know some of these scientists do it, some of them don't. I think Rick Strassman's done it from what I gathered.
I'm going to say there isn't anything I
don't think he's promoted the fact.
Hasn't promoted the fact at all, but you know,
Yeah.
If you're in that place, then really,
if you listen to the conversations that he has and the things he talks about, then you can read between the lines.
but you don't really want to talk about it because still there's that that attitude towards it, and it could ruin
Right.
Don't
you think we need that though? Don't you think we need like more scientists at least checking these things out? Because like I feel like if you just gave somebody who, let's just say, throw out, okay, like astrophysicist or physicist like Lawrence Krauss, he's a complete reductionist. He thinks that the material world is all there is. There's nothing else beyond it. Reductionist to the core. Now, if you gave him a high dose of DMT, it makes you wonder, do you think that some of these people would change their mind on their perception of reality?
It would be awesome, and I've thought
it'd be a nice experiment. Yeah, let's do this.
Also, I think what comes with that is the fact that these guys are seriously intelligent. I mean, seriously, maybe they could give it. They could come to this experience and give it some real,
exactly,
real credibility, real credence, and like, okay, well, this is I'm so clever. I can. This reason for why this experience takes place, and obviously if it does turn them from a reductionist to the other side per se, then you could have answers very quickly.
But it's a big risk to take on your career, isn't it? To do that. So I think it will be nice, but I think really the perception around psychedelics needs to massively change before someone in that position may do it and actually speak about it. I mean, do it and then do research off the back end of it from what they may have got from that experience might be something different, but actually to come out and speak about it. And who was the guy who come up with the DNA? Wasn't he? Didn't he?
Sir Francis Crick. I was just going back and forth with this guy that we've had on our show, Bruce Fenton. He came up with an article saying that it's a urban legend. However, in the article at the end, it talks about this quote that he says where he's describing, he's like, some people see this and some people see that. And they're things that only if you experienced acid that you could know about. So it's like, there's some gray area there where I think, was he using it? Yes. Was he high on it? Well, the second that he came up with the model for the double helix, I don't know. I can tell you this. I've actually seen similar structures like that, similar to the DNA structure while under meditative states and psychedelic states. I've seen pyramid things. I've seen, gray alien shapes, things like that, like archetype type things. So I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibilities.
And they're all over ancient architecture as well. So these guys have been doing these compounds for many, many years, haven't they? And we see it in ancient architecture. And we know for a fact, like the stoned ape theory, these guys, the cave paintings were probably done while under the influence of stuff.
Right. Well, even like by you guys, not far from you, Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, I think one of the pillars is basically like a double helix in there, where they're talking about like, how would these ancient masons have known that,
And also, some of the Muslim temples around the world, just like, there's no way that doesn't relate to the DMT experience.
I saw a picture of one last week. I'm like, that looks like a psychedelic picture. The inside.
Incredible. And it's
they're definitely trying to depict something in the mandalas and the
some of it's just the geometry and the colours as well, and it's just the way that it's a dome. A lot of these ancient Muslim places are domed, and it's just sort of, you look at it, it gives you that sense of the perspective of a psychedelic experience just by standing and looking up at these things.
It's like a psychedelic IMAX or something.
It is.
Primitive.
Do you have any experiences that are separate from the other ones, like something that was so profound, or an entity, communication, or something that, either one of you, that is just like a game changer for you, or is it all kind of consistent?
Well, for me, I'll answer this first. So for me, I do have an entity that comes to me more often than anything else. Sometimes the mood is completely different. I mean, and we're talking when you go into the deeper doses, the deeper experiences, it can be anything from alien planets, essentially, all sorts of crazy stuff like that. But there's an entity that I regularly come into contact with, which is a female presence, feminine. So if I say female, feminine, and can be sort of anything from child, but all powerful in its presence, but very childlike in its appearance, right through to sort of a lady, a fairy queen or something of that nature. But blue skin is the overriding element that I hold on to. Blue skin, and she's very nurturing. It's almost like she's waiting for me when she's in the experience. She's waiting for me. She's very nurturing, very motherly, very sometimes quite scolding and like a mother can be, but very very loving. It's almost like a very paternal vibe to the experience that she's familiar with me, she knows me, she's waiting for me, and then sometimes pushes me on to a further experience or a deeper level of experience. And there are quite a few sort of profound moments within those experiences. But the one thing that I came to sort of realise after the experience was that after years of having this experience with this blue-skinned lady, and Justin and I were watching YouTube videos, and we came across a video of Graham Hancock, and he was talking about an ayahuasca experience that he had when he had writer's block, and Mother Ayahuasca said to him that he had to go on and write this novel, and he ended up writing the novel Supernatural.
Yeah,
he described her as a blue-skinned lady, and it was like, you know, whether or not that is a sort of an archetype that is familiar within that experience to a lot of people, because I had never heard of it before. But
our buddy Paul talks about Pachimama. I think that's who you're talking about, how he refers to Pachimama, who's like Mother Earth or something along those lines.
Yeah, and I mean, there are lots of profound synchronicities that go along with those experiences, and I definitely come out of it feeling like I've just met an old friend. So yeah, I mean, definitely.
I mean, for me, because I do like to argue this stuff afterwards, but I suppose one of the most profound ones was in the early years when we were doing it. There was a time that I said, I literally, I wanted to be in a dark room. I wanted no outside stimulation, and I didn't want to be like, I didn't want to feel as though it was false, because there was music there and there was light maybe that could be seen through my eyelids when my eyes were closed. And I literally did it like sat up, legs crossed, in a kind of meditation position. And the onslaught came on very quickly, and then humorously enough, and I think I discussed it in the last one that we posted, the entity that was literally, and it's not always massively visual, but it's definitely something like an understanding. So, and what I kind of got was Alanis Morissette from Dogma, the movie.
Oh yeah.
As God, yeah, she was the creator, and she was, like Paul said, she was slightly scolding. She was very like childlike, like she is in that movie, and because I've been contemplating for a long time, because I'm trying to figure out the universe in my own tiny mind for some reason, and we
all have.
Yeah, exactly. And she just was like, right, have a look at this. And then in front of me, so I've gone through the geometrics, everything was dark. And then right in front of me, it was just like the end sequence of Annihilation, the movie on Netflix at the moment. And it was in the emotional feeling behind it was, this is how time and space interacts together, and la-di-da-da. And like, the information was far too much for me to try and understand. But as I was being given this stuff, she was saying to me, look, this is what you want to try and figure out. You're never going to figure it out. And this is who you are as a person. Well. And it was like, she's like slightly mocking in the thing that you're never going to get to this place. So actually what you should do is, as a human being, you can, and it was kind of like a yin and yang thing, you can be whoever you want. You could be this person with massive defects, you can be this person who's really good, you can continue your life however you want, because in the whole of reality or the universe, it actually, the magnitude of everything, what you're talking about is really not that significant. And it's only significant to you. So you need to be comfortable with who you are, whoever that is. And yeah, I suppose like at that point in my life, I was struggling with a few things, and it kind of came out the back end of that, and was, well, it was like doing a counselling session, like 2 years worth of counselling in about 5 seconds. I came out of it, I let a lot of stuff go, a lot of resentments, a lot of things that I thought I had anger issues over. They all kind of drifted away, and I kind of started moving into a different perception about how I should generally be. I mean, I'm not saying my life got massively better from the back end of it, but certainly my understanding of who I was, and yeah, that kind of changed and gave me a lot more ease around it. So from that, there was a profound and good experience. On the flip side of that, there was a time that I went in and kind of had a clown, a really malicious clown, who literally was like, "What are you doing here? You're coming back. You're doing it too much. Why are you back here again?" You know, there was a lot worse language in that. And from the back end of that, I probably, you know, I moved away. We didn't touch it for a good 2 years after that.
No.
And I think there was a massive fear about, like, we spoke about doing it. We met up a couple of times, and there was definitely a blocker for me, because I'm like, I don't want to go back to this place and have this guy there again, this entity, saying to me, "What the fuck are you doing here?" So yeah, you know, it can go either way, really. I mean, and it was almost as though you've been really doing it too much. You're not going to get any more information, so don't come back here. Just leave it for a bit. And that's kind of what I did. And then obviously the next time I went back,
but still, even still, we're telling these tales like that's how it happened.
Yeah, of course.
But it's you almost add an element of your own
truth and imagination.
You add an element of your own imagination to these things, but then who's to say that is not part of the experience? You know, it's sort of like the after ripples, or the, you know, of the experience. It's so great to talk about these experiences, but it's the most difficult thing to talk about at the same time. That's the problem with it.
And there's not one recording of us where we actually
we're
actually able to,
I think,
talk through that experience with each other, just us two, really natural, us two talking.
Yeah.
And even in that, we're like going over this stuff, and it's like, yeah, just trying to put it into perspective and express exactly what it was which you can't do, because it's very difficult to explain. Like we was talking about this the other night, weren't we? Looking at a cube from every side and having a concept of understanding and looking at the cube from every side. Because when you look at it, we generally see a 3D in this reality. But generally in that space, even though you're not looking at the cube from every angle, you understand the cube from every angle.
It's very difficult to use the English language, which is based on our reality as it stands now. Even when you start getting into quantum physics, etc., obviously then it goes a different way. But general day-to-day conversation, how do you describe something that is multi-dimensional, emotional on levels that you just can't comprehend? Visually, you've never seen anything like it, couldn't possibly imagine anything like what you're seeing. So there, and you sort of saying, so you've got questions, you're asking yourself questions like, you know, the tussle of, is it my brain or is this something else? But you know that your brain, you can't even imagine what you're seeing and what you're experiencing. So therefore, how could you possibly make that up? So and I think the profundity, you're talking about having profound experiences, the profundity comes in, as Justin said, in the days and weeks after the experience, because it's the subtle changes in your behavior due to the experience that you've had is where the lesson you're learning, the lessons that you received, if that makes sense. You know, you're not going to get a bit of information about how a black hole is formed in the DMT experience. What you're going to get shown is something you can't possibly understand, but it takes you so far outside of your ego and your waking consciousness that the subtle effects and changes it has on your behavior are done at that subconscious level, and then you realize how much of a twat you've been. You're
more open to stuff.
Yeah, you know, you're empathetic to. You're way more empathetic to what's going on in the world and the people around you because of the experience of almost being scared, witless, and fearful of your own life. To, you know, you think you're going to die, and you think you have died, and the guilt that comes with that, and letting go of that. That this is very therapeutic on that level, and then you sort of, you're thankful that you're back, and you're thankful that you're okay, and then you move forward with a renewed, revigured view of life. If that makes sense. It's a lot to take in there, obviously.
Sounds pretty intense, man.
Yeah,
but that is the deal.
In what you're saying, you're glad to be back. There's a point when on the back end of everything where there's the realization that you've done DMT, and then there's an understanding that you know, I'm coming out of it, and then you might open your eyes and you're like, hang on a minute, whoa, no, because the whole place that you're in is still completely visually different lights.
Yeah, it's like you've done 500 kilos of mushrooms,
and then you're kind of so there's definitely a separation of body and, I want to say, consciousness or spirit, but but we're just using that as a description at the moment. There's definitely that separation from your body. There's definitely a separation when you're deep in that space, and a complete separation of who you were as a human. And then when you start to come back in, for me especially, we discussed it the other day, the language thing is very strange for me. I'll come back to that. But then there's a feeling where I'm coming into my body and I start to feel my hands or my fingers, and it feels really dark. It feels really, not dark, it feels really damp and clammy. Synthetic.
Like you're coming back into your body is an alien feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh, now I'm back in physical.
Now I'm back in the physical reality, and it really does, for me, it's very uncomfortable, which is strange because everything in that space, even though you're not pinpointing that feeling, it's only when you feel the clamminess you remember back to when it was like real crystal clear. I want to say cold, but it's not cold. It's like
crystalline.
Yeah, it's just clean,
polished,
clean, so clean. And then you come into this body and it just feels very, very uncomfortable. So saying coming back in, there's like there's a feeling of I've done DMT and now I've come out of it, and I was being shown all this stuff, and now I'm starting to lose all this stuff. There's a clinging in your brain going, what was that stuff? What was that stuff again? And then you feel your body and you're like, oh no. And it feels real. I really don't like that re-entering the body type feeling. And then all of a sudden it gets more normal, and then you're back to being not, and then it's like
5 minutes it's gone, and you go and have dinner with Queen,
and you sat there like, oh god, yeah. I was like, oh my god, I feel so comfortable and relaxed now, and it's like, yeah, it's amazing.
That's what people that experience near-death experiences, kind of similar thing. Obviously, the light tunnel and all that, but then when they come back, when they're revived or whatever, they wish that they were still dead. Most of them talk about how wherever they were is a more peaceful, more clear, kind of similar to what you're talking about, where
there's no pain or anything, of course.
Yeah, so I mean, and then you were talking about Paul, you were talking about quantum physics and stuff. I mean, we can only perceive like 2% of the universe.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, what is it, like 95% of the universe is mostly made up of dark energy, and then there's dark matter mixed in there as well. We don't even know what that is. That could be this other metaphysical realm,
which is all about us the whole time. Yeah. And we've had that discussion where the vibration or the filters, because the brain, when they've MRI'd the brain on certain psychedelics, they expect it to explode with all this you know,
extra activity
going on, and generally it tends to just dampen down. Yet the visuals you're seeing are more visual than when my eyes are open right now. You know, the colours and the vividness of it and the clarity of that stuff. Yet your brain is actually not functioning on the same way. So we've discussed the fact that maybe it's just a switch in your perception. So the compounds are attaching to your brain and allowing your visual cortex, the cortex, or the bits that allow your ears to give you sound, and all of that stuff is slightly askew. And in which case you might be just perceiving like the dark matter or the realities that are literally right here, right now, that as we are functioning as a human, you're just not open to. And that concept is just like, well, that's one of the reasons I keep going back in, because I want to try and understand whether that's like the truth of it. And the lower doses we've done recently have been all about, because when you really go into that space, when you've done a heavy dose, there is no concept of the body or any of that.
No.
And what I've been doing recently is like trying to keep my eyes open, trying to visualize stuff and see what I'm seeing, and literally move it. You know, when you do that, you get the traces when you do LSD. Back when I used to do it. Trying to see that stuff. Now, that stuff on a low dose of DMT is the most intense form of, so a trace is literally, I'll move my hand and my hand is still up there for a long, long time before it comes down here. And I think one of the first times I ever did it, when we were really inexperienced, the first time I ever took, it was the first time I ever took DMT, I remember sitting next to myself and looking at myself and understanding that I was looking at myself next to myself.
Out of body style.
So I was definitely out of body. It wasn't enough to break me through it into a massive dose, but I definitely shifted out almost like an astral projection and was like looking at me going, oh, hello a minute, that is very, very strange. But it didn't last long enough for me to get any real concept or move off into some other dimension in a different form. I literally was just, I'm here and I'm here. What is all that about?
Well, so definitely a weird thing too, that most of plants and animals have this chemical. It's an endogenous chemical in our bodies. We produce it in our lung and our liver. Speculation, we produce it in our brains. I know some people have tried to correlate it with dreams. There's obviously no real evidence for that yet. You'd probably have to tap into a live brain to get any sort of results on that.
I don't follow the dream. I mean, I don't. There's absolutely no similarity between the DMT experience and a dream. The only similarity is when you try and remember a dream,
right?
That's like trying to remember a DMT experience. But the experiences themselves are so vastly different because of the sort of alien, otherworldly nature. And this is what Andrew Gallimore talks about, is that the brain, I'll have to try and get this right. So when you have a dream and you dream about your house, but your house looks different to the house that you live in, and different aspects of the dream come into play. Now, the brain has learned how to identify those things over the course of your life. So way buildings are structured, the way the streets are, the way the ocean is, so on and so forth. So when you dream, although it can be distorted, the brain will make up a distorted version of what you already know. Whereas the DMT experience is like nothing you've ever experienced before. And so that's why part of his theory says that the potential is that it is something else, because there is no correlation. You go into this experience as a 30-year-old, 40-year-old man, and you're going to have an experience that bears no resemblance to anything you've ever learned, seen. The brain has, grown accustomed to over the course of your life. There's nothing to, do you know what I'm saying? So
right.
That's where, and I agree with him on that level. The DMT experience is completely different to dreaming. But the quality of the like I said, the trying to remember a dream, that's where the similarities are. It's not the experience itself.
I think the fact that the DMT is in, like you said, it is part of most living things. It's in the human body. and I think the term the spirit molecule really holds something for me. So with regards to a mescaline or another psychedelic, I'm a lot more comfortable, even though it's very powerful and can be harsh as well as beautiful at times. I'm much more comfortable using a DMT than I would be than doing. I certainly wouldn't want to do a 4-hour trip on LSD or go into that space for that amount of time. So I think for me, there's some key points there. I'm not going to be gone for a long time. Within half an hour, I could sit there and have a glass of wine with the mother-in-law and have a normal conversation. And whereas these other substances, they tend to be slower in reaction and last longer, and their intensity might reach a point, but it just goes on too long. And I think because, getting back to it, because it seems to be a natural thing in us and all living things, right. It just feels right.
And the body handles it so well. You know, it's not toxic. We produce it naturally, like you said, it's in nature, plants, animals, etc., etc. You go into the experience, you come out of the experience, and within a couple of minutes, there is no come down, no hangover, no other than the experience you've just been through.
I was just going to ask you about a hangover, but you just
nice.
No, there's no.
The feeling is quite comfortable,
but that only lasts for 5 minutes.
But exactly.
You know, I mean, and then 10 minutes after the experience, you could go and run a 5K run. You could do a 5K run.
Yeah, he was just talking about speaking with his mother-in-law. It's like 15 minutes ago, I was just in a different world. Now.
I mean, we've done it and gone to the pub and sat in the pub 20 minutes later and had a pint. And we're like, you're sitting around people that are just in the pub having a pint, and you're like, 10 minutes ago, we were traveling the echelons of hyperspace, you know. It's that in that respect.
There's definitely a mental twist, but it doesn't necessarily bleed into having a discussion in a normal situation. You can hold that back. However, if someone broached the subject of something like that with you straight off the back end of one of them, you'd probably be able to enlighten them to a few things, because you'd still have some of that stuff deep right there at the forefront of your memory. But and I think that's one of the reasons that it's more comfortable for me.
Businessman's lunch.
Businessman's lunch. Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Don't you think though it could be, you know, like you think about ancient occult type rituals and different things, you know, all these mysteries from back in the day. It seems like, just based on what we just talked about too, imagine experiencing this a long time ago, you know, like either BC or a little after, whatever. You would have that feeling that you just talked about. Like, imagine you just had this profound experience where you were in heaven, you know, a realm like what people consider heaven or different dimension or whatever. And you're looking at all the people around you, like, these people have no fucking idea what, you know.
Yeah, and you'd want to talk about it as well. You'd want to express that, wouldn't you? Because the profoundness of that experience would lead you to believe that there was something spiritual. Because back in those days, that would probably be your only way of identifying that experience. And then,
but it would shape the world, wouldn't it? That's the deal. Back then, that experience,
it could be the basis of religion. It could be.
I think from our perspective is, you know, it's whether it was DMT or, you know, whether it was the mushrooms on the savannah growing out the manure, or whether it was just, you know,
mushrooms grow everywhere too. Mushrooms are all over the world.
I read something recently that they're growing more. They're growing on stuff that they didn't grow on before.
Yeah. I mean, fungus is always evolving. I think if you guys haven't checked out Paul Stamets, you should definitely check out his work. He's awesome, but he talks about how 1/3 of all the earth is comprised of some sort of fungus or mycelium,
which in itself is an amazing thing.
Oh yeah,
that mycelium will just feed the whole forest from
supply nutrients to parts of the forest
and give it in an equal share as well. You know what I mean?
It's in a whole ecosystem.
And the fact that it's neither animal nor vegetable as well is where it's kind of.
Yeah, we're actually not that. I think we're pretty close to fungus evolution from the evolutionary break off, we're closer to fungus than we are plants. I believe. I'd have to look at that, but I think I recall.
Yeah,
I think there's just so much more that's gone on in our history, and you know, Mr. Voot put me onto something that I've got to get into about the psychedelic Freemasonry. He sent me a link a couple of days ago, yesterday, I think. I think, let's say, there's just so much more that's gone on in prehistory than we have got any idea about, and these substances coming to the forefront now, and it's just, I don't know, it's just so fascinating, isn't it, at the end of the day. And we've been doing it now for 12, 15 or 12 years. Well, it's difficult to say. But we're no closer to an answer than when we first had the first experiences.
There's more questions, right? I mean, forget the answer.
Yeah,
but we're definitely different people. We're definitely more. There's definitely changed our perceptions. Give us a better understanding of who we are,
and a respect for. I mean, I've always been a bit of a nature man anyway, but you know, my love for the planet and everything on it, and the natural the natural ecosystems and environments that we need to look after, and what we're doing to the planet, and you just become so much more in tune with that. You know, it's it's quite it could change the world. It definitely could change the world.
You guys talk about simulation theory, I think, a couple times on your videos. Do you believe we are in a simulation? I mean, you got, you know, like Tom Campbell, Nick Bostrom, Elon Musk. Who else? There's a lot of people that believe that we are, in fact, living in a simulation, and some of them are some of the smartest people that we have on this planet. Do you believe that, or is that something you've just been playing around with, or?
I think the reason that I talked about it in the video was because, for two reasons really. One is that it's a good way to for somebody who hasn't got any experiences with these compounds or these topics, it's a good way for someone to get a handle on the fact that reality is malleable. It's not cut and dry like we think it is, like your brain tells you it is and your ego tells you it is. With quantum physics and everything else that we know about, reality is slippery. There's no two ways about that. So I think firstly, it was a good way to put that point across. But secondly, something else I've been sort of playing with recently is that the possibility that, you know, if you look at the film The Matrix, he takes the red pill and he comes out of the Matrix and he's in, you know, the robot world with so on and so forth. It's a possibility, and nothing's off the table here when you're talking about these experiences, that if you ingest DMT, maybe you come out of the simulation for that. If we are in a simulation, maybe you're able to come out of the simulation and go back to base consciousness or something of that nature, or a level of consciousness, and then you come down from the DMT and you're back into the simulation. If to loosely use the word simulation, you know, it could just be some sort of variant on just the way the world works.
I've heard people repeat. I don't know if you're familiar with Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia, that series. There's I think it's called Psychedelic Toad is the name of the episode, where they are excreting the glands of the Bufo alveolus, and Hamilton smokes it, and he's just a chemist. He's hardcore reductionist. It doesn't seem like he believes in stuff, but then when he goes into this world, he just keeps repeating love, you know. And somebody like to correlate that to like Tom Campbell, My Big Toe, his theory of everything, he talks about how the universe is just funneling, like the entropy is just funneling towards love. So I mean, I don't know, is that something you guys have felt in these experiences, that's a primary landing spot for all this? Or
well, I mean, the conversation that we had on Joe Roop's show last week, the aspect he was talking about, the love that you have for your kids, you know, that sort of love, not sexual love, but that the love that you feel for your child. And I sort of kind of reversed it. So going back to this blue-skinned lady, this female, feminine entity, presence, whatever you want to call her, I feel the love from her, like a paternal love. She loves me, if that makes sense. It's like I'm a child of hers, one of many, whatever. However,
like a God love, like if you were reading the Bible, like how God would love his creation, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe taking that paternal love to a completely higher level. But yes, I mean that's the sort of love, or the only real love aspect of the experience that I am the sort of weak, not inferior is the wrong word, vulnerable. I'm the vulnerable presence in this experience, and she is the all-powerful, all-knowing, omnipresent. But she loves me, if that makes sense. So that's the love aspect of it from me. So yeah. There's a love element to it in that respect.
I think
I must quickly go to the toilet. Is that okay?
Yeah, I was going to do the same thing in a minute.
No worries.
So yeah, I think the love element isn't something that's massively given across. I mean, there's definitely you definitely feel like there's a connection between you. I think it's off the back end of when you come out and you then have the ability to feel compassion in a different way and not be judgmental. I think that's more what I get in that respect. I don't immediately go into a place and just feel like there's love. And then getting back to your comment about a God, the love from a God, I kind of would argue that if you look at the First Testament, or
the Old Testament.
The Old Testament, where you had a God that said you got to sacrifice your firstborn son because of something that you've done. That kind of that there's. So I argue that from a religious perspective. Now,
I'm not really. I mean, I was raised Catholic, but I'm not religious. But I just meant from the sense that like how God. Well, okay, so you're right. The Old Testament is kind of weird because it's almost like that God is like a inferior God. He's got like an inferiority complex where he's like, you shall take no other God but me. You must worship me. Yeah, sacrifice your son, blah, 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 blah. That's why some people believe in Gnosticism, because Gnosticism explains that God isn't the one true God, but this God Yaldabaoth that created our world out of ignorance and is not familiar with the one true spiritual realm, which he was trying to replicate. But yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I just meant from the pure, like the way that God is talked about when he says he loves his children, or like just from that aspect. I don't necessarily mean from, it's not like we're reading the Bible here or something.
Love and compassion, the same thing. Is when you're not talking about like love for a partner, or like you said, your children, and love for humanity or your friends. There's a definite compassion there. Which is human. Humanity. Humans should have this feeling.
Yeah, I love my mates. I love my wife.
Of course. So there's a compassion there, and I definitely feel, that there's been compassion in them places. But then on the flip side, when you have a long crab crawl round the expanse of your visual sight, which is all DNA, and then as it comes round one particle and looks at you and goes, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And then it scuttles off. There's no love or connection or compassion from that crowd. Yes. It was just like shock. What the fuck are you doing?
Sometimes it can be very cold. The experience can be very devoid of emotion and devoid of compassion for you. So,
which could mean there's many different levels of where we're going as well.
Right.
And also as well, something I've sort of held on to for quite some time is that there's definitely a crossover point. So if you could split the experience up, and this might be quite hard to grasp, if you could split the experience up sort of from the lightest dose possible to a complete breakthrough, there are levels of consciousness that you move through that you are definitely holding on to aspects of your subconscious, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The deeper you go into the experience, the more your own subconscious and your own predispositions fade away until you become nothing that you were before you went into the experience. So, and Rick Strassman, he did a podcast a little while ago. He was talking like likening to looking into a mirror, and sometimes you're seeing the reflection in the mirror, and sometimes you're able to pass through the mirror. So, it's not a sort of cut and dry. You take you ingest the molecule, you're in another dimension. There are definitely multiple layers of you that you take in with you until you get to a point where they aren't those have gone. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you think, though, back to the creator type thing, though, it's so hypothetically, if we are in a simulation, or there is a creator god, or whatever you want to say, some higher aspect or higher being. I mean, I know some people think we're all one and we're just split into fractals of this one major mind or brain type thing. But do you think, though, this creator god, I mean, from what, I'm a creative person. I assume you guys are both creative too. You guys seem to be into filmmaking and doing this kind of stuff. When you create something, you have a sense of like love and pride for that thing because it came from, it's a part of you. So from that aspect, that's, like, I guess the equivalent would be, I'm not a parent yet, I just got married, but if I were to have a kid, I would assume that would be similar in that sense, that you're creating this being, you have a hand in the creation of this being. So therefore, it's a part of you, basically. So I would correlate those two things together, whether we're in a simulation and some guy created a algorithm and we're in the algorithm, which I think is a little crazy to think about, but just hypothetically, or we are just this biological creation, or whatever you want to say, somebody threw some DNA, across the universe and, directed panspermia, or whatever you want to call it. Is that what you're saying when you say, is it like a creative love, like this part of you kind of a thing?
It's definitely, it is, because like I said, the experiences vary, but definitely I've had more experiences than not with this blue-skinned entity that yes, I would say that I am a creation of hers, if that makes sense. Definitely. It's definitely some aspect to that rings true. And I think I agree with you as well. Creation, we are creative people, and you do have a love for the things that you create. And maybe that just goes on and on and on. I mean, it definitely seems like you, or whatever this thing is that you come into contact with, it knows you. It's almost like you've been away on a school trip and you're coming back, and they're glad to see you. How did you get on?
Old friend.
So it's, yes, I would say yes. There is a creator aspect to it, definitely.
I know Maurice here wanted to ask you a question about your gear because he's a filmmaker himself.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, it looks like you guys got some good visuals. What kind of cameras you guys using?
So I use we've been flying the Inspire 2s in the air, doing my work. I've now, for what we do, I've just bought the Mavic 2 Pro with the camera, which is a cool little bit of kit because that can go in the backpack and go anywhere. And then on the ground, I shoot with a Ronin S and a Sony A7 III. So I chopped in on my Canon forever. I got rid of the Canon gear because they just couldn't keep up, videography wise with Sony. So I've got the A7 III and I use the Sigma Art lenses. I've got the 85mm, the 35 and 50.
Nice. And you guys are using that little that gimbal?
Yeah, the Ronin S. Yeah, it's great, man. Great bit of kit. Yeah,
I'm just used to that from my perspective. That was like the one we did up on the Sisbury Ring was one of the hardest.
Yeah.
For me to fit, because I'm coming into the filming and we've got to change it up a bit because obviously a lot of the stuff at the start was Paul holding it and then filming me and then Paul holding it, and it needed to change. That initial bit was we were walking along and I'm literally like having to do this with the gimbal to keep, because Paul's going up there. We're kind of doing this.
Yeah, they're not easy to use. If you don't know how to use them, they're not easy. It can still look crap if you don't know how to use the gimbal.
But yeah, it's an interesting concept for me to come in and learn it from that and try and pick up. And obviously we've got to try and expand where we're going.
Spread the load as well.
Make the videos longer, explore the topics a bit more, and trying to figure out how we're going to do that is going to really push our boundaries of where we're going to or how we're going to have to film. We want to do one on the boat and up the river. That's going to be quite cool.
But it's difficult. It's quite a hard format to work with because you want to make it look like it's two mates having a conversation.
Right.
But at the same time, to adopt that sort of YouTuber style with the B-roll, the 120 frames a second B-roll stuff, splicing in with different music. I've adopted that style of video making from the big YouTubers that I follow, but that's quite difficult to do as a two-man conversational. It's easy for one guy to do a bit of blurb, cut to the B-roll,
right,
aerials, and then back to that's easy to do. But when you're trying to have a conversation and you're trying to make it conversational, we've tried filming with holding the Ronin and just walking along and talking. And I think from my creative filmmaking side that we lose the engagement of the audience, because essentially when you're talking to the camera, you're engaging the viewer. But when you're talking amongst yourselves, the viewer can, with long sequences, it can become a little bit disengaging. So we've got to try and work out how we're going to do that. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just me talking, cut to B-roll, Justin talking, cut to B-roll. So we've got to work out how we're going to progress with it and make it a bit more engaging.
And not only that, the bones of Paul and of our relationship and the discussions we have generally been
just us chatting,
us two chatting.
Yeah.
So I sent, I don't know if you were able to watch, but we're playing around with that animation thing.
I watched them actually. I liked it a lot. I thought it's a good idea. I mean, is that something? Are you guys animators, or is there like a program that you can?
And it's something that, I mean, I'm pretty good at painting and art stuff. So I've really got to go back and like get some animations. That stuff was all done on my iPhone with some very free iPhone app downloads. They were simple. Played about with it, and we might put it on, we might not. And the reason we want to try and do that is because there's back recordings of Paul and I, and those discussions are really what brought us round to where we are now. Those discussions we've been having for 20 years, whether we've used the substance or not, we've always discussed the fringe stuff, the stuff on the outside, and our different kind of views, which we were able to talk about but not argue about. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And not clash. So we were from when we first met, we were able to discuss this stuff. And after
some of that's good listening, but is it good enough?
Is it good? I don't think it will overtake. It won't overtake the Jaguar Dream and what we're doing with the other side of it.
It'd be a nice addition.
But actually, adding that in maybe once a week, there's some old stuff that we can try and turn into it. And if it grows, then I'll pay for a proper program and I'll learn the art of animation and change it up a bit. If that's what people like, but really the whole point of that is getting Paul and I in those situations when we just sit here and have a conversation. We've sent some of them recordings to Joe Root, and that was one on the Light in the Void, and that was one of the reasons he really bought into Paul and I and started speaking to us straight away, wasn't it? Because it's aside from the very bad language, the concepts and the way we try and discuss this stuff can be hilarious, but then it can be
it's real as well.
It can be
there's elements of
gold as well.
Yeah, there's elements of sort of some cool little concepts in there that you just wouldn't think that two builder lads and film from the UK would be having these sorts of conversations. So
some deep stuff, and then you tie it into the way we speak, and then the bad language, and then the way we shout at each other to get our points across. It can be, and I think from that point of view, that is the goal of Paul and I. But putting that into the other stuff we're doing is going to prove to be a concept that probably Paul's going to have to figure out, because he's the film guy.
And they take quite a while as well, those films to put together. It's not, you're not just whacking to the equipment that we use is quite heavy, data heavy, and it's like they're not easy to just whip a video like that together in a couple of days. I mean, I've got
right.
So anyway, getting back to the topic at hand.
Well, I was just actually, if you guys make your documentary, you should definitely have people doing it, like show people doing it, maybe even yourselves.
Yeah.
I'll be prepared to do it. But whether that where you would then put that documentary out, or whether that would actually be financially viable, because when you're talking about a documentary, we've both got our everyday lives, and then
I'd like to do a documentary. I'd like to do a documentary. We talked about.
And also a Netflix one.
Yeah, well, we would be good to do a documentary that culminated with I don't know whether or not that will happen, because we, whether or not it will happen or not, but culminated with a trip to Peru to do a ayahuasca retreat, because then you've got the eye candy of the environment that you're in to make an epic film, but sort of a group of lads, because there's not just us two in this. There's a few other guys as well that we do this regularly with.
Do you know anybody that's ever done ayahuasca and then smoked DMT while they're on ayahuasca?
No.
Jesus.
No, I mean,
I just thought about that. I'm like, I've never seen anything.
I'm glad I never have, because that's a scary thought.
Before, I've spoken to people that have smoked DMT, a breakthrough dose of DMT on the peak of an LSD trip.
Terence McKenna talks about it.
Yeah. And I've actually spoken to people that have done it, and my initial thought on that would have been, Jesus Christ, what the hell is that? I mean, that must just be all over the place. But weirdly, they say that when the DMT wears off, the acid's gone.
Yeah.
The acid experience is so nullified by the DMT experience that, you could just, it's a walk in the park. Whereas 10 minutes before you smoke the DMT, you could possibly been having a bit of a trying time. You do the DMT. Right. And then you come down for the DMT and the acid's just like, it's gone, not gone, but it's just so easy to deal with after that experience. So
I think mushrooms would probably go good with DMT because they're very similar molecules.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's all interesting stuff, man. It's very interesting.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up here. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about before we get out of here? Or I think we covered a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, it's been good. Well, there's loads more content coming from us. We've obviously been speaking to Mr. Voot, Mr. Khan, and a number of other guys. We're going to be hopefully doing videos with all those guys. We've got some really great concepts for the videos, because we're not just going to keep to the psychedelics. We're going to go to the fringe topics as well, the simulation theories, and there's just the stuff that Justin and I generally chat about. So loads more content to come. Everybody keep watching and subscribe to the channel, and we'll
cool. Yeah, we'll add your link in our info on this episode.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm gonna leave a comment with my comedy channel, so you guys can check that out. But
definitely
keep up the good work, man. I enjoy the quality, and like you guys said, you got to do something different to separate yourself. So keep doing it.
Where's the comedy channel, Bruce? What is that?
It's just a little it's just like some skit comedy, some fake commercials and stuff like that. It's a little,
and that's on YouTube, right?
Yeah. I'll
Fat Earth comedy.
Fat Earth. I'll look for that, mate. I'll definitely look for that.
Wait. Yeah, I'll comment and I'll try and get you guys. I'll spread the word of your channel and get you guys some more subscribers and stuff.
Do the same from our end, mate. Yeah.
Awesome. Great.
Well, we appreciate you guys coming on. We'll get you back on here again sometime in the future, and everybody check out Dreamin' Jaguars on YouTube.
Awesome. Thank you, boys.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers,
thanks, Paul. Thanks, Justin. Have a good one.